and I'm proud to be part of the Aviation Safety Alliance for Africa.
My name is Shamsu Anjorin, and I'm a founding member of Aviation Safety Alliance for Africa.
Thanks, Shamsu. Now, we're here today because this week is the ICAO African Aviation Week. And that brings all the African Directors General of Civil Aviation to the Nigerian capital, Abuja, to plan the continuous improvement of safety performance of African aviation. So a special welcome to all our viewers in the Hilton Transcorp Hotel in Abuja, Nigeria. Safety in African aviation has significantly improved over the past years. And the same applies to runway safety, where we've seen good improvements. But still, runway safety is one of the biggest challenges when it comes to incidents and accidents in Africa. One of the best ways to improve runway safety is to have effective runway safety teams in all major African airports. We are joined by guests online and here at the table to talk about that. Shamsu, who are our guests today?
Thanks, Tom. We welcome 3 guests today. From Accra, Ghana, we have Albert Taylor. And from Nigeria, we have Thomas Adamu. And here in the studio, we have Jan Smiting.
Well done.
Very nicely pronunciated.
Yeah. So, and we are going to talk about this runway safety teams. 1 in 3 in Africa. One in 3 in Africa. 1 airport in 3 in Africa has a runway safety team. And let's see how we can improve this. Tom, to you.
Thanks so much, Shamsu. I think at the moment we don't have Thomas online, unfortunately, because of technical issues, so my apologies about that. Let me give our viewers a little bit of information about our guests. Now, first of all, we're joined by Albert Taylor, a former air traffic controller. Albert has been the air navigation specialist in the ICAO regional office in Senegal and is now an expert and a volunteer at the Aviation Safety Alliance for Africa. Thomas, who you'll see in a video later on, is the safety manager of Abuja Airport with the Federal Airports Authority of Nigeria. And our third guest, like you said, Shamsu, is Jan Smiting, aviation incident investigator and former chairman of the Amsterdam Airport Runway Safety Team, and with us here in the studio. Now, we'll be looking at 3 main issues today. Our first topic is, does every airport need a runway safety team, or can perhaps the tasks of a runway safety team be integrated in another form that is already in place? Then we'll look at how to sustain a runway safety team when there are perhaps not that many occurrences at the airport. It may be difficult to keep the momentum going. And our third topic for today is the topic of runway excursions. With lots of those starting with an unstable approach in difficult weather, what can we do to reduce those? What can air traffic control do to reduce the number of unstable approaches? Now, to set the scene, we'll hand over to Thomas Adamu from the Federal Airport Authority of Nigeria to talk. And let's have a look at the video that Thomas recorded earlier today. Okay. It seems I've overlooked the video, which is a big error on my side. I think we'll see if we can maybe plug that in later in the program. But maybe Shamsu, maybe I can hand over to you to start with a conversation with Albert online. So Albert, if you can unmute your microphone, about whether every airport really needs a full runway safety team, or if perhaps the tasks of a runway safety team can be embedded in existing safety groups. Shamsu, over to you and Albert.
Yeah, actually, that was my first question for Albert. So, Albert, if you hear us, can you elaborate on these topics of runway safety teams in connection with other committees that exist on the airport?
Thank you, Shamsu and Tom, and to all our listeners. Yes, the answer to the question is that runway safety teams necessary for airports. I would rather have them rather than not having them. And as to the duplication of efforts is there, but that is we should look at the positive sides of having them, and then also what can be put in place to mitigate any duplications, if any. So as an air traffic controller, we depict the approach controller with one eye and tower control with 360 eyes. So with the runway safety team, it gives you more eyes to look at what is going on at the airport, whether right or wrong, and with the level of expertise that are available, try to harness all the expertise in order to improve aviation safety. Now, specifically as to the role of duplication or whether the functions could be absorbed by others, it is always important to have on-site reviews, and the runway safety team does that. We can have auditors, external auditors, to look at certain areas. But at times, it's good to have people around who know the environment to pinpoint where the hotspots and problem areas are. When it comes to duplication, I categorize them into three. One, the duplication that can exist between the runway safety team and the organizations that operate in the airport. The second one would be the duplication or challenges that may arise between the regulator or the civil aviation authorities and the service providers. And finally, between the aviation professions, the pilots associations, and air traffic controllers association are listed in the ICAO manual of runway safety. So regarding the role of the individual service providers and the CAA is recommended to be part of the local runway safety team. But the role of the CAA is more of advisory or observation of the work that the runway safety team does. And when they finish, they will bring out their communications or recommendations for the CAA to incorporate the necessary rules and regulations. But the responsibility for conveying and organizing the runway safety, local runway safety teams remain with the airport services authority. When it comes to the organization, the duplication between or confusion between the various organizations and their staff represented on runway safety team, it's important that the organization accept that the people are doing the work over and beyond what the organizations can do and have eyes elsewhere. And so organizations should try and make it easier for their personnel who are nominated to serve on the local runway safety team to do their work effectively. It's also important that the people would not use the opportunity to do things that will tarnish the image of the organizations they belong, but in all things collaborate so that we can have a positive attitude and cooperation. The final group is about pilots and air traffic controllers who are key eyes of the local runway safety team to try and not let the professional association issues override the responsibility to the industry as a whole. And the things that they find wrong, they should use it in the channel rather than through the association, the union channels to the disadvantage of the industry. So these are my views. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Albert, for those insights. And I think particularly will be interesting, and I'll take it to Jan in a moment, also to look at this case where at a smaller airport, you can ask yourself, do you need to set up a separate entity, or can you work with another forum that you already have? Jan, you've been the runway safety team chairman at Amsterdam Airport here, which of course is a very busy airport, but you have more recently worked in a smaller environment. What would be your view? Would you think you really always have to set up a separate runway safety team with separate meetings, etc., or could you integrate it into some other sort of before.
If you have a small airport, then maybe it's a good suggestion to incorporate in your runway safety team other issues like ground handling and ground movement issues, as well as bird control, fauna control.
So the other way around, basically.
Yeah, and because everyone in the world, and Albert was referring to the ICAO manual on the runway safety teams. The runway safety team is a very established, well-organized principle. So if you have little, we come to that later maybe as well, little incidents, a few incidents to investigate, then I would say, maybe I can bring it back to that big airport, Amsterdam. There we had a separate platform for ground handling, a separate platform for ground movement, a separate platform for bird control, and the chairman or women from those platforms were talking together with the runway safety team again. But that needed to be that way because it was such a large airport. But the advantage of a smaller airport could be that all the entities could be in, and whatever you call it, you can call it an airside safety platform or whatever name you attach to it, but the principle of the runway safety team to have all the stakeholders at the table and define the risks that an airport runs because of its specific layout, because of its environment, it would be very nice to have incorporated, even for a small airport. So you must have, to my view, a runway safety team, perhaps with another name, and you can expand its area of responsibility or mandate. Mandate, now you mention the word mandate. What I often see at runway safety teams is that it's very nice to have them. We have very fruitful discussions. We say we can do this, we might do that, and then do they have a mandate? Can they issue recommendations? Are these recommendations going to be adopted, to be followed? And if not, for what reasons? So whatever runway safety team you have, I would say try to give that team a mandate to issue recommendations. And if those recommendations cannot timely be adopted, state the reasons why and be transparent about that.
And I think maybe then we can take it back to Albert Chamsu, because I think what would be interesting also is Albert has visited loads of airports in Africa and looked at what was happening there. And I think the mandate that Jan was speaking about, what if there are recommendations to be made, who is going to make sure that they have the authority to carry that further forward? Albert, I don't know if you can mute your microphone, but is that something you've seen in different airports you've been in your ICAO capacity, that there's important, that the importance is there to make sure that people also have the mandate that the recommendations are being implemented?
I think it's very important. The effectiveness of a runway team, or in fact any other team, is when you have identified or made recommendations to see that the recommendations are being implemented. That gives encouragement to delve into other details. But we have found, especially in cases where it requires funding of any corrective measures that are identified by the runway safety, becomes a challenge as to who will raise that money to do it, alongside the priority of the individual organizations that are involved. And so funding is a challenge, and it tends to make the work of runway safety not encouraging, because you make recommendations based on safety and you don't see implementation. I think that if the airport service provider consider these as a priority items, and therefore push to all corners of a particular state or service provider the requirements or the recommendations that have been made, and also supported by the executives of the various organizations from which the individual runway safety members belong, then they will have a momentum and critical mass to maybe obtain government or other fundings to carry them. The greatest disadvantage, I should say, is not getting funding, and at times getting some of the experts to participate. If you talk about pilots, it's not easy for airlines to release pilots who, when they are sitting in the cockpit, there's a lot of revenue for the airlines to come and sit maybe a day or half a day's meeting of the runway safety teams. So these are the challenges that plague the concept. Thank you.
Thanks, Albert. And I think that's an important point, because what you're saying, there's one thing is to give an organization the mandate and to give them the mandate to make sure that their recommendations will be followed up. But the other thing would be to make sure there's a budget available to pay for whatever recommendations they bring online. I think in a moment we'll come to Thomas. I think the line has been restored, I understand, which is fantastic, because due to an error on my side, the video of Federal Airports Authority of Nigeria is currently not available. So I owe a big apology from my side to the fan for that. So in a moment, if we get to Thomas, but Chamsu, now delving into your expertise, not so much as member of the Aviation Safety Alliance for Africa, but also your former background in Air Afrique and Boeing. What have you seen in terms of best practices, perhaps, when it comes to runway safety in all those years? Have you come across particular incidents you've learned from, for example?
We know that in operation, runway safety, runway conditions is crucial when we talk about runway excursions event. And I think that this is also an area where having a runway safety team on the ground can provide the right information to operation on to what is the runway condition. The other area is the unstable approach, that what we talk about that in a few moments, at airports, where I believe runway safety teams can contribute.
Okay. Jan, if I can take you back also to another point we wanted to discuss, which is what do you do when you work at a smaller airport when there are perhaps less incidents and occurrences? Any suggestions? I'll come to harvest from you, if I may, but also from Thomas, if he joins us in a moment. Thomas, I'll come to you in a moment in terms of what suggestions you have to make sure, if you're a smaller airport, that you're also being able to keep the momentum. Jan, any ideas from your side?
First, I fully agree with Chamsu about the runway condition, drainage, rubber deposits, heavy showers in Africa. So these are very typical things for Africa. So now your question. When it's a smaller airport, you might have less incidents, although there are always more than you would think.
Yeah.
It's about the willingness to report those incidents. If you expand your little runway safety team with the areas I just have been mentioning,
ground handling,
you have already more activities to take care of. There will be always very interesting incidents happening in the neighborhood of your airport, in neighboring airports. So check those investigations, see if that applies to your runway safety team, take the lessons from that.
And that could even be from across Africa, I guess.
That can be globally, but there are typical African things, like the rubber deposit I was mentioning, in combination with heavy rain, in combination with not awaiting the shower to pass the field, taking the landing, resulting in a runway excursion, which is a typical Africa scenario, I would say. So then already you can engage expertise from others.
Yeah.
And I would say it pays off tremendously, I think. And I fully, what Albert just was saying, it's sometimes difficult to get the people on the table, around the table. But visit the premises of ATC, see their equipment. Visit the airport, see what inconsistencies there is. How is the signing? How is the marking? Why is there this one and only crossing over the runway which should be diagonally instead of straight? So look at your own airport with critical eyes. Have that hands-on.
Try to understand the different
and the challenges that the meteo people, they are down in the cellar and there is not a weather radar up in the tower. When you visit your own airport and you start to think critically, you think, why is this beautiful? We have a weather radar, but why does the air traffic controller does not have
access to the data?
To that data, so they can guide the aircraft, see why aircraft are circumnavigating, expect that they are now coming from the left instead of coming from the right. So look at your airport critically by visiting and talking and finding the challenges.
So if I hear you correctly, and Thomas will come to you in a moment, so if you can get the microphone open on your side. I think what you're saying is, first of all, you think you may have fewer incidents than you actually have, or occurrences. And one of the things to start is to understand all the stakeholders, how they work, what their operating environment is, and you'll learn a lot from that. And then reach out to other airports in your country or in the region in Africa to use what they have learned for your operation.
Yes, and learn from the challenges that the Meteo people have, the ATC people have, the airline has, maybe the layout of the airport has.
Yeah,
so try to learn from them.
So Thomas, if I can come to you, and once again, now that we have you online, my sincere apologies for my messing up on this side. I think it's a slip, that I forgot to bring the video here. So we'll make sure that we'll make it available once this episode is going to be on the YouTube channel. But now my question to you is along the same lines as to Jan. If you think of an airport that has less traffic and maybe thinks, well, it's difficult for us to keep the momentum going, to keep people happy and engaged, would you have any suggestions from your station in Abuja, for example, what you've learned where you thought, well, these are some of the tricks we played to make sure that it's still worthwhile to get together as a runway safety team?
Okay, good morning all. The first thing I want to say here is we have to understand our culture's diversities. When you are setting up a runway safety team, it's not entirely independent of the environment. You look at the cultures that are prevalent in that environment. Here in Abuja, we know that we have some cultural issues. Our safety reporting system and other safety indicators that need to be on ground have not been fully integrated. And because of that, we have to do a lot of sensitization. And if you have challenges with maybe the airlines, the ATC, and other organizations that need to take part in the runway safety team, I think it's important that we reach out to them, bring them on table, discuss issues with them. Where there are differences, we iron those differences, and we forge a common front.
Yeah, and I think also what in line with Jan was saying, quite often we don't understand each other's profession that well, maybe not as well as we think we do beforehand. So that's something. Have you got practical examples in Nigeria, perhaps, where you share lessons in runway safety from other stations, from Port Harcourt or from other places in Nigeria?
Yeah, we do that a lot. Okay. For us here, like I said, we have an umbrella where we come together sometimes. Maybe if we are organizing a program in Abuja here, we invite people from Lagos, from Kano, from Port Harcourt. They come around, we interact together, we share lessons we have learned. If they are doing the same, we also go there, we look at what they've done, and we learn from their experiences too.
Okay, great. Well, thanks so much.
Thomas, have you experienced the challenge of keeping your team motivated because of not enough events at your specific airports?
Yeah, that's actually a challenge for us. But somehow, the team needs to be motivated. And quite frankly, funds are needed to be able to at least actualize most of the activities of the runway safety team. And sometimes we have to go out of our way to try to solicit for funds to be able to do so many things. But we have actually been reaching out to organizations within. Sometimes we reach out to the airport operator, sometimes the air navigation service providers, sometimes the airlines. But honestly speaking, the airport operator has actually been most of our funding, and they have been actually doing great.
And I think that's what you also mentioned in your video, which people will see later, but the fact that you said even things like runway resurfacing, which became a prominent finding of the runway safety team where you managed to convince Federal Airports Authority of the importance of that and to free up funds for that.
Yeah. When we normally in the runway safety team, the leadership is drawn from the different organizations. So we come together and we don't look at issues from one perspective. We look at it affecting us all. So once we have an issue, we identify who is supposed to be responsible for ensuring that this issue is solved. So we reach out to the organization and we monitor and discuss with them. We try to ensure that at least whatever that needs to be done to correct issues is done and in good time.
Okay, thanks so much. Maybe in a moment we can come back to Albert on the line as well in Accra, because again I think Chamsu, it would be interesting maybe to hear his views as to what he's seen as an ICAO auditor, of course, because he's been all across the continent. So I think it would be great, Albert, to hear some information from your side, what you've seen, what was done to keep the momentum going, and like Jan I think also suggested, learn from other airports across the region. What have you seen in that respect around the continent, Albert?
Thank you, Tom. I think the greatest thing is to get people who are individually motivated in the team and who personally have that self-commitment and desire to make a contribution. Because the runway safety activities does not happen only at the time of incident. And so getting people who are self-motivated, more education, the work has to be done. If work is done before the incident or accident, it is preferable than to wait for accident to energize people. So I think that the issue first has to be people with self-motivation and interest, to also giving people in the team tasks of research and development innovative solutions, as Thomas said, in their environment. We can read about certain concepts, but how do we implement them in their environment? So that is very important. And I think also that we should also, as mentioned by the other person from Schiphol Airport, there are positive things we are doing. And then when it's documented, it's also good to share with other local runway safety teams elsewhere. These are my additions. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Albert. I think you need that also brings it to the point of you have to make sure that the people that you bring into the runway safety team are energetic. We all read a beautiful article from the Hindsight magazine of Eurocontrol from a gentleman called Ian White, I think from Australia, who also really hammers on the point that make sure people don't do the job because they have to, but because they feel a certain passion for it. Is that something you've seen as well, Jan?
Absolutely, absolutely. Albert was indicating that it's sometimes difficult to find the people at the table to make themselves available, but to my recollection, everyone was really trying to come because they were so motivated. I have very fond memories about the time of my runway safety team at Schiphol. Very fond memories.
Because of the passion of the people as well?
Yeah. And we have been visiting other airports as well. For example, Charles de Gaulle, they had an advanced ground movement system. They had runway safety status lights. They had things that we did not have yet. So it was a very energy-supplying bunch of people, really.
And so, of course, people could say, well, you speak about surface movement guidance, that's not feasible maybe in Africa, but I think the more important point, which you I think mentioned, is that you will always see things at those other places which you have not addressed or have not thought of.
Yeah. Many best practices you see, and of course the scale of Schiphol Airport is different than for many other African airports, but we got a lot of useful information from that, and also again a lot of energy to take up things. Yeah.
So it is important to exchange best practices among various runway safety teams. That keeps them motivated and engaged. Thank you.
And I guess it could even be things like a WhatsApp group, isn't it, where you exchange stuff maybe within an airport or
maybe
outside.
Not so applicable for Africa, but once an aircraft had been involved in a runway incursion, let's say a small class D runway incursion, we would write that airline in a non-punitive way, a letter requesting a response. From that, such nice information came. Then you establish contacts with that particular airline. They have an opening to discuss about Schiphol. They say, but you have a very complicated airport. And these taxiways are really confusing to us.
Is there something you can do from your side?
Is there something? And that we also offered in that letter. Is there anything that provoked the occurrence from happening? And is there anything we can do? And we got many nice contacts from that. So in that way, we got in contact with a great deal of airlines that were operating on the airport. So that really helped.
But like you said, the importance then is that the letter should be phrased in a friendly,
Absolutely,
way.
absolutely. That must be, well, we all know Annex 13, but that should really be even more than in Annex 13 it's phrased. It is a very non-liability.
About learning as
about
an organization.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for that. I think, Jamsu,
Yeah, maybe we can hear from Albert on that, from his ICAO position. Is that something that you happen to organize, sharing experience between various airports?
Oh, it seems you're muted at the moment, Albert.
Thank you, and apologies. Yes, that is really recommended. I mean, we are in the aviation community, as it is in a community, and therefore the positives in any community should be shared. And when it is shared, and I said that if I've not gone to somebody's farm, you think that you are the best farmer. Probably when you go there, you see better methods of doing the work you are doing better and improve. So it is recommended that people do share information and do collaborate. And the example that Thomas gave, that wherever the activities, they also invite the others to come in, is very important. In the end, we should also share the challenges that we have and how we address them. That is more important. Talking about the problem is good, but more so how we resolve them is more positive in helping others improve what they are doing. Thank you.
Thanks, Albert.
I think it's looking at time. Well, you wanted to bring another because we have to move on soon, I think, to the next topic. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. No, I have no particular thing in mind at the moment.
Well, I think, Jamsu, what's the last topic?
The last topic is about runway excursion. As we said, 3% of landings are unstable, and 97% of those continue the landing anyway, and about 10% of those continued landing end up being unsuccessful.
Yeah.
So there is clear correlation between the unstable approach and the unsuccessful landings, undesirable situation. So what can a runway safety team do to improve this situation?
And perhaps, Albert, I think if we can take that initially to you in terms of the air traffic control side of things, there's a beautiful manual from a few years back, actually, from Kanzo, which is all about unstable approaches. It's difficult to get, but we're happy to share it with people. As an air traffic controller, Albert, what have you seen? Where can air traffic control contribute, perhaps, to reducing those unstable approaches that Jamsu was talking about? I'm afraid you're still muted again, Albert. All these buttons, and we always have to think of.
Thank you. Apologies. Yes, unstable approaches lead to unsuccessful landing, and at times it's better that there's a misapproach rather than to land and have a runway excursions.
Of course, yeah.
And so it is very important subject. At the approach and landing phase are considered one of the critical phases of flight. The cockpit is very busy. The aircraft is configured to perform by flight management standards of inputted data, etc., etc. And anytime there are instructions that sort of vary the plan profile the pilots have chosen, has to increase workload on the pilot. A simple example, for instance, like the air traffic controller giving direct route from between particular points rather than follow maybe the standard arrival. That's what reduce the truck miles, which is good because the airline saves fuel. There's reduction in flight time, probably reduction in noise footprint as well as the carbon footprint.
Yeah.
But by doing so, it gives the pilot as additional work to try and input different elements into the flight management system that had already planned. And that can increase the workload. But more importantly, what it does, that the aircraft had to slow down by some distance. That means you have reduced the distance for which the aircraft should travel in order to reduce the speed. So it means that the profile has to change. And if if all factors don't merge at the appropriate time, it causes unstable approach. But the air traffic controller was doing so to expedite the traffic and also manage the flights, the sequence, the traffic sequence has. But that inadvertently or indirectly could come to unstable approach and probably escalation or misapproach.
Yeah.
Now, the other part is also the meteorological information. In recent cases last year or two, where not in part of Nigeria, there was the aircraft that the military aircraft making approach, and at the final stage, realized that the wind was not favoring, and therefore to use the reciprocal approach, the reciprocal runway, only to crash. So the question is that if the meteorological information was made available to the air traffic control on time, the air traffic control could have passed that information and for his own choice of runway he used, etc. And the pilot also following the proper approach, but that caused an accident. So having the right meteorological information on time for the air traffic control to communicate to the pilot is also important for either stable or unstable approach that leads to landing. The next one has to do with the airline itself. The operating procedures of many airlines, and in fact, most aircraft are configured that if you should do a misapproach due to an unstable approach, the aircraft communicates already to the ops about the status. In some cases, that involves investigation to see if the pilot did all what has to be done properly. And such situations could also affect the pilot's decision-making process. The worst case, if I may say, management is not taking place in the cockpit. But when there's a misapproach due to unstable approach, it means that the aircraft has to go around. There are diversions if possible, and that means fuel. It means flight time. In certain cases, that the aircraft is positioned at the wrong airport, if I may say so, and affect the whole airline business. So they try to make it difficult, especially coming out from COVID. These have become critical areas that we need to look at it and make sure the airline and the various safety teams address the issue so that it doesn't put pressure on the pilot cockpit decision making. That ultimately becomes unstable approach, escalations, or even accidents. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
And I think also indeed, Chamsu, I think the point that Albert just made links to the point you made earlier. I mean, in a way, this controller who thinks I'm going to give a direct routing thinks he's doing a favor to the pilot, of course, because it makes for a shorter route, saving fuel, which is even more important. But of course, if we don't completely understand each other's working domain, that actually would look like a favor all of a sudden adds workload to the situation. Jan?
Yeah, absolutely. Supply sufficient track miles, supply your descent clearance timely. We all know the famous Cali accident, whereby the crew suddenly was advised to, offered to have a straight in. They had passed the critical beacon Roseau while they were thinking it is still ahead of them, and they ended up in the mountains.
Yeah.
So that's a dramatic example, but it illustrates what you mean.
Yeah.
I very much go along with the things that Albert has been mentioning. If you have a runway safety, so that is the adequate spacing and supplying sufficient track miles, have your equipment in order. Windshield alert systems, weather radar systems on the tower, have your runway surface friction
information
available. The runway status, is it wet, is it dry, is there standing water, what's the braking action, things like that. And of course, these days, all airlines need to have a flight data monitoring program. So when you have those pilots on board of your runway safety team, and if you have adequate transparency between all the parties, you can share the rushed approach data from the airlines, and you can make that a performance indicator and say, last month we had 20, next month we want to have 15 or less, and try to develop a policy on that one.
I think also in a moment, because I'm looking at time as well, I think it would be great to ask each of our members around the table, and Albert and Thomas out there, for maybe one suggestion they have from their side to improve the working of Runway Safety Team, and then we go to the closing.
Yeah, and while we are asking them that, we need to focus on increasing the number of runway safety teams in Africa. We only know that today it's only 1 into 3 at major airports that have a runway safety team. Do we need to increase this number? How do we do that?
How do we do that? So, Thomas, if we can come to you first, actually. So this question to you would be, if you can give the viewers out there one suggestion in terms of, how can we increase, perhaps like Jamsu said, the number of runway safety teams. Have you got one suggestion for us, thinking of the time as well?
Okay, before I really go into that, I just wanted to add a little to what you guys have said concerning the runway excursions.
Yes.
I know that most of the excursions that happen on the runway are because of contaminants on the runway. Like here I've said, water, weight, standing water, ice, snow, slush, or whatsoever.
Yeah.
Those are most of the things that causes excursion on the runway. And timely information is key. If you know a runway has water, standing water, slush, snow, whatsoever, it helps pilot to make informed decisions on landing easily. So it reduces the chances of having excursions on the runway. And with the introduction of GRF, which has really taken care of most of these issues. So reporting the runway surface condition is key to reducing excursions. Then for my advice on actually improving, having more runway teams, I think we need to do a lot of collaborations. We need to do a lot of sharing of information and also training sensitizations. Okay. This will go a long way in assisting airports that don't have it, because most airports don't even understand what is runway safety. Yeah. So they need to get information. They need to understand what is runway safety, how do they need to set it up, and issues like that. Yeah. I think with that, it will go a long way to help them.
Great, thanks, Thomas. And I think that means, Jamsu, for the Aviation Safety Alliance for Africa, there's work to be done to share that information. Yeah. Can we next take it to Jan, and after Jan we go to Albert for your one suggestion, your one tip?
Yeah, if the tip is about to increase the amount of runway safety teams, the number of runway safety teams, I would say the runway safety teams that are in place, they could issue some simply newsletter, not a glossy magazine, but with their results, with their policies, with their activities, and spread it out. Be as transparent as possible and send it to the neighboring airports. And then they can see how effective a runway safety team is and celebrate your successes in that magazine.
Those newsletters,
And then more people might see, wow, this is a mechanism that is really working.
And equally, they can learn some of the lessons that are being shared in there.
Yeah, brilliant.
So, Albert, over to you. One last suggestion how we can increase the number of runway safety teams, like Jamsu said, from 1 in 3 to 2 in 3, for example. And your microphone, please make sure it's unmuted. Yeah, it is. We can hear you.
Yeah, it's on.
It's on.
It's on. First of all, runway safety team is a recommendation. And to have a situation where 1 in 3 airports only have them means that there's more effort to do. So probably we need to get ICAO to put more highlight on the need for runway safety team, as was done initially. The momentum has gone down. Mm-hmm. So we'll probably go back to liaise with ICAO so that they can put it again as a front burner and keep it going. States that haven't, as recommended, is not recorded as not having it as appropriate. That would be number one. Number two is to try and see.
Yes, one more then. Okay, there you go. Yes.
Motivation programs at the local level. There should be some incentives for people who, if there's no activity, will research and bring ideas that we can improve what we are doing. So a program to motivate people to go beyond what is the ordinary. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Albert. So I think that's a call out to ICAO, and all the Director Generals of Civil Aviation are currently meeting in Abuja to keep the candle burning next to the work of the Aviation Safety Alliance for Africa. So let me then also pose that question to you, Chamsu. What would you suggest as one of the things that the runway safety teams or the airports out in Africa could do to increase the number of runway safety teams?
I was thinking about it, and honestly, I want to jump on Jan's suggestion, communicate the successes, I would say. Yeah.
Share successes.
Share successes.
Well, great. Thanks very much, gentlemen. I think, Chamsu, that's all we have time for today. And I think I speak on behalf of all of us at the Aviation Safety Alliance for Africa, because there's many more people than just Chamsu and myself involved. When I say thank you for joining us today, we hope we've provided you with some fresh energy to boost those local runway safety team activities and to get more of them, as we heard. And make the ones that are there already a bit more effective if we can. There's always room for improvement. Our call as Alliance is please share information and ideas with airports across the continent, in your own country, but also outside your country. Maybe start a WhatsApp group, exchange emails, learn from each other, like also Jan highlighted. A very big thank you to our panel, Albert all the way in Accra, Ghana, Thomas in Abuja, and Jan here at the table. For your insights, your time, and joining us here. Also, thanks to Thomas Adamu for a brilliant video which he made, which I forgot. But again, like I said, we'll upload it on the replay version of this video. Equally, Sylvanus Dakup at Nigerian CEA to make that happen, the video presentation. And thank you, the viewers out there, for tuning in. We'll put a recording of this webinar on the YouTube channel in the coming weeks, including then Thomas's beautiful video, so you can watch it again. But also please tell other professionals out there in Africa to watch it. Lastly, a little bit of a plug here for some other work we're involved in. I'd like to invite you to attend the next free focus session of the ASAA Foundation. The focus sessions are Africa's online safety TV show that informs, inspires and entertains African aviation safety. That next focus session will deal with organizational culture with guests Gwendy Doc van Heel, Jonathan Lewis and Chamsu will also join me there. It'll be broadcast on Wednesday the 14th of June. So find out more and register for free on the Aviassist Foundation's website www.aviassist.org. I think from all of us here in the studio and back in Accra and Abuja, thanks for watching and have a great day.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Albert, Thomas.
Yeah.